from Brazil. Greetings, gamers, and welcome to the 123rd live stream from the MisfitGamersStudios. I'm your host, Vortex, and this is D&D Discussions. In today's episode, we have a community creation coming from Desmar Sama. It is another subclass called the Banshee Curse, and I'm really interested to get into this one. Don't know anything about it, but based off the name alone, it's given me like Warlock vibes. I'm thinking this could easily be something where this is, a possession or a haunting become patron kind of thing. I've even thought of like possible cleric subclass could go along with this somehow, because I'm thinking like necromancy or like communing with the undead and then having some sort of like kind of a relationship there. So yeah, I'm really interested to see where this goes, because my thoughts of what a banshee are and what represents a banshee, I think, are a little bit skewed, because I have several different origins and sources that I pull for like my version of like High Point Banshee. So I'm really curious, because there are, I think in my, from if my memory serves me correctly, there are like three main like historical like references to banshees of different cultures. So I'm really curious which one this will follow and how that's gonna like tie into everything. So that's going to be a lot of fun. It is just me today. I do not have Kage here in the studio, but I did see him lurking in there. So if there's any questions, that you have specifically for him, he might be able to answer in chat. He might not. I'm not really sure about that. But some other updates real quick before we get started today. Aside from our regularly scheduled Friday stream that we are going to be having, as always, this Friday, this Saturday, we are going to be doing our September extra stream. We still haven't named what these extra streams are going to be called just yet. We did have a poll go out to our subs on Discord, and we are converting that over. It was a big tiebreaker, so I'm trying to figure out how to reconcile how I should convert that over into a community poll so we can decide what to call those episodes, because we do kind of want to have those be more standout since they only happen once a month or less. We've already also had the community purchase October's extra stream, so we are already planning on what date and topic we are going to do for next month. But this Saturday we are doing this month's. It is going to be the history of divine, or it's like the history of gods, basically like the influence. It's not going to be so much of a history of, because there are far too many D&D gods and there are far too many things to try and calculate or categorize in terms of where they belong, what edition and all of that. So my goal, because this is going to be a very extensive topic and because I have limited resources, my goal is going to try to be to pull together as much as I can to explain the influence and intent of like divine power and gods and deities in the D&D settings based off of each edition's what I'm trying to think. What's the word I'm trying to think? Kage's not here to help me remember. Essentially trying to look at how campaigns were run from the older editions to the newer editions, find out where did the divide from it being more focused on like deities and gods, not necessarily on a religious basis, but just being more on a power of hierarchy. And now we have a lot more, open-ended options. I mean, the thing that always comes to mind for me is, the concept that paladins no longer require a divine link, which in and of itself is not a problem, but it does show an interest in trying to make things a little bit more universally acceptable, I would say, or one could say politically correct, I guess, by taking something so fundamental about the game, in terms of the standard pillars of all of the classes. You're taking one of those, like one of the 5 or 6 major pillars of the game, and turning it ridiculously religious, even beyond the clerics. So I saw the need for it, but I really want to understand how did that come about? Was that really an adjustment made abruptly at 5th edition, or did we see some sort of step back from that? Because from my experiences playing the older editions and listening to accounts of older editions, my interpretation of it was that it was always encouraged, or at least the way that the older modules played is that run-ins with gods or divine influence, divine intervention of some sort seem to be a lot more prevalent and a lot more built into the game, whereas now it's seems to be merely an option if you choose to go that route, but it doesn't seem to be as much of a core mechanic to have deities and other creatures of that level be as consistent in the gameplay and in the storyline. So that's kind of what I want to look at and see if that is just simply anecdotal from my point of view, or if I can find actual references through the modules, through the core books, and see, is there an actual is there an actual like trail that we can follow, especially things like the DMG. How did the DMG encourage DMs to utilize deities in first edition versus fifth edition, right? And even in the player's handbook, if I can find evidence or not evidence, but if I can just find it in the source materials when these were brought up and how they really influence the gameplay, that's what I'm really hoping to kind of unravel. Because I feel like, when I think back on like Forgotten Realms, it just seems like that was so much more engrossed with the structure and the hierarchy of the deities and their influence and what they were doing in terms of like how the campaign and how the plot unfolded. Whereas now it seems that they've been pushed in more into the lore and less into the gameplay, if that makes sense. So that's what I want to uncover and unravel. I'm like just in the beginning stages of it. I have the rest of the week to do it, and it's gonna be a really interesting topic to unpack and see where we go with that. But we are also going to include 2 cocktails that are going to be custom creations of the Misfit Gamers Tavern. I've already figured out what the recipes are, so we will be making those and announcing those on stream, because those will be really fun and they'll tie into the topic. And we're hoping to kind of have that as something that we do whenever we do like a tavern stream or these extra streams. It'd be kind of cool to have like a custom cocktail kind of created for whatever the topic is. Don't know how often. I don't know if it's going to be exactly every time, but we'll figure it out. Reminding me to talk to you about Paladins Without Gods is an interesting twist from the NPC series. Okay. Well, I mean, that's basically Paladins Without Gods is basically what 5th edition did with Oaths too. You know what I mean? Like that's really the interesting aspect is there was definitely a bigger connection to having like deities be a funnel of power. And now it's simply definitely, it's still an option, but it's not as much of a, well, that is one of the only options for power, right? Obviously with the consistent extension of different magic types, we've consistently gotten different sources of power. But I feel like with Paladins, what I'd really like to figure out is like which edition really was the first one to step away from the full religious aspect of Paladins. And I'm guessing it's probably around 3.5, where I'm assuming that in 3rd edition and 3.5 there was still deities involved with Paladins, but my guess is that it was less prevalent to live the lifestyle, because I'm thinking back from like 1st edition, 2nd edition, the ideas of being a cleric and being a paladin seemed to be more intertwined with the role play and how you represented like the religion that you followed, whereas now it seems less important. And I want to say that right around 3.5 is my guess that we saw a step back from, yes, you're a paladin of so and so, but much less restriction on how you were expected to act and how different you were expected to represent the virtues and the values. And we saw that too when we did the history of alignment, and how 3.5 is basically right around the time where they were like, hey, we still want this added in as a mechanic of roleplay, but they really stepped back from the penalties and the disadvantages of not playing into the alignment. And that's where my theory is that's exactly what's going to happen with Paladins. Is it's going to be still tied into having some sort of relationship and a following with the deity, but I have a feeling that right around that time they're going to take away the penalties of not following all the virtues and not following so strictly with how that that particular deity would have reacted or whatever. So yeah, I and that's really the fascinating part about it, is because it's like outside of clerics and paladins, the only other like aspect of that conversation is really like how were deities intended on the DM side to interact with the players, right? Was it encouraged, or was that just what they did back then and then we've just changed the style of game? Because there's always that, right? There's part of it which is what the book intends and encourages, and then there's the other side of, well, what are the players and the DMs creating themselves, and what is the general community doing? Especially when it was such a smaller community back in the day, the influences weren't that varied. So yeah, I think clerics, paladins, and again the DMs in terms of how they were expected to utilize deities, I think are going to be the three main focuses of this. But again, we'll kind of see how the rest of the week pans out. NPC series, it was lost knowledges that paladins could channel divine magic energy without needing the god. Okay, so still a divine-like power, but it wasn't the god's choice. It was more of the paladin's ability to. So I mean, that's still kind of makes sense. I mean, they still act as divine conduits. It's just not necessarily at the intent or the conscious will of the deity, I guess you would say, versus what the traditional paladin would be. And so if a mortal could channel that type of magic without the god in the mix, they could pose a threat. So they buried the god. So they buried the knowledge, and the only way for them to do that type of magic. Interesting. So okay, I mean that is interesting as a concept. I don't know how much I like it. I mean, it's definitely intriguing to have a access to divine-like power that is obviously being hidden from the mortals by the gods. Like, I definitely get behind that type of lore work. I mean, I have something very similar with High Point in terms of like the War of Power and everything, but that was more of a lockdown of power and more of a back in the day the power was available and now it's not. I don't know, like in terms of like the way that I've done it in High Point, that power, though it did technically exist at one point, isn't available anymore, and that's just because of of basically all the red tape, right? It's just the sheer number of those in power who have all the balance. Almost. It's like nowadays, I think back on like the very first websites and how easy it was to get a company's information if you knew how to go through their file systems, because everything was basically just directly into their systems, and now you have multiple layers hosted on servers, hosted away from all of that, that information. So what once worked as a bypass just physically no longer exists. I know that's probably a really bad example, but I don't have any more. I don't have Kage to talk and give me time to think. But I think of things like that in terms of when I've done it in High Point. I look at things like that kind of an evolution of, yes, there are secrets, but I don't know, having access to divine power without the authority of the gods is more, in my opinion at least, it is a god tier problem, in the sense of, if someone wants to fill a vacuum of power, that is the problem for the gods to deal with. But a mortal being able to deal in that level of power, I think my hesitation has just always been my interpretation of like what magic is and how it represents itself. And the idea of a mortal even being able to survive handling like divine level magic, I think has always been a barrier that I've set for myself in my lore as well. So I get it. I like it. The idea of them keeping it secret. I just don't know if the mechanic itself of there being a way for mortals to work with divine magic, or at least paladins without a god. I don't know if I would run that, but it works as an explanation, especially for a great plot point. But that's the other aspect too, is that's a great explanation, but how do you work that into someone who actually wants to play a paladin who doesn't have a god? Like, would you allow them to start at level 1, somehow seemingly coming across that information and being able to bypass it? Or would you judge it something like they would choose to be a paladin of a deity, and then partway through the campaign they would discover that they could separate from their deity and remain there and maintain their powers? because that would be, you know, that I think is the other way that I would have a hard time placing it in a campaign, is if it's hidden knowledge, how do you justify such a low level character obtaining the knowledge? And then if it's not, and it's something that you have to game for and obtain, which would be a really great plot point for a campaign, at what point do you give it as an option for the current campaign to utilize? And then does that unlock anything for you, right? Like, does it really do anything in terms of the gameplay? Or again, is it more of that role play aspect of now you're no longer tied to that deity and their virtues, and you can kind of, you know, do what you want with it? So those would be my first like initial thoughts on how to make that work. So you start as a fighter, but always wanted to be a paladin, lived the paladin devotion life, but fighter class. Okay. So it's like fake it till you make it, basically. So at what point, so is this supposed to be like a multi-class where they eventually let you like multi-class into paladin? So plot points and development allow them to class swap to an oath to themselves. Okay, so it's a different version of the current oath paladin, but this one is to yourself. I mean, single class, and then you just do a full class swap at whatever level you deem it acceptable. I mean, okay, that's interesting. I mean, it definitely reminds me actually of like how the bard and the original, well, mostly the original bard was in like first edition, where you had to like kind of game through other ones in order to be able to learn enough and then adopt the traits of that, right? Like you had to be a fighter, learn druid spells, you had to be a rogue, and then eventually you could become a bard after achieving all of this. So basically tri-class, and then that became a specialty combo. Yeah, I don't know. And that's really like the interesting thing is, like, for me, I guess if I had to just say like my personal choice, I feel like they could have just gotten away with doing another class altogether, kept paladin and cleric the way that they were, but you know, we already have mages, sorcerers, and warlocks, you know, all completely different ways to get magic, right? Innate, gifted by a non-religious deity figure, you know, some sort of powerful entity, and the other just being, you know, study. So I don't understand why. Perhaps maybe just the thing that rubs me wrong is paladins made sense and fit the role that they did, but now it's almost like they just wanted to add more roles that the paladin can fit, instead of just creating another class that was on par with a second. They could have just created another class that's on par with the paladin in almost every way, but addressed the issues that people had, right? Like I guess I would have just decided that, yeah, you have clerics and paladins that have the, you know, the religious path, but if you wanted a paladin like character that didn't follow a deity but still had the same level of powers, I mean, I don't really know why you couldn't have called it like the blessed, right? Like you could have just literally had a whole other class, or, you know, you could have called it like, I know we have like a monk class, and I'm not necessarily saying like, you know, a subclass of monk, but you couldn't really call it like, you know, monk, which unfortunately I think Kage and I have talked about this before too. I think the name of monk in the class itself is actually the wrong use for monk. I think we've talked about like monk could have been a whole different class, and then what we do have as monk is probably just more of a martial artist. But I feel like we could have just added to the variety, right? We could have kept cleric, could have kept paladin, and then just added variety to that in order to address any issues that or concerns that those weren't making, right? Like, you know, instead of making them oath paladins, why didn't we just make like oath keepers? Like why maybe that's where I'm just having the issue, is like, why did we have to, for lack of a better word, tarnish paladin and take it and have it fit so many other roles, when we really could have just said, hey, here's a brand new class that is near identical but does its own thing and has its own, you know, concept of role play. So maybe that's where I'm just at, is it doesn't make much sense to me that you would do that, you know, multiply what paladin can do instead of just make a more solid class that could have represented that. So that's my 2 cents on the whole paladin issue. But let me see, well, we do not have a Des in chat. I have pinged them on Discord, so up to them to catch this at the future. In the future on YouTube, which you guys can do on our VODs channel. Check it out. And if you also, before we get into it, if you guys want to also submit your own homebrew for us to review on Mondays, you can do that via our Discord. !Discord in the chat will get you the link. Also, ! Links will also get you our link tree, which will get you to all of our socials. So anytime you're in chat, whether we're live or not, those 2 commands will work, and then we'll get you all of our socials. So let us begin. Let's get set up here. So I don't really have Kage here. It's just going to be me on the camera. I will kind of try to face, oh, I guess it doesn't really matter which way I face. It's going to be easier if I read it this way. All right. Well, Lucifer will be back, so they will have to miss the intro. So sad. But here we go. All right. Actually, one more second while I clear my throat, and then we can begin. All right, so today we have the Banshee Curse. This is a subclass. Oh, it is a sorcerer subclass. I was completely wrong. Okay, it's a sorcerer subclass coming from Desmar Sama. We've seen Dez's stuff before, so I'm actually really looking forward to seeing what Dez has. And I know Kage was upset that they weren't able to be here for this one, but I am sure, Dez, if you were interested, Kage will give you all of their interest or all of their insights, advice, and suggestions in Discord if you ask. So let us begin the Banshee Curse. Not the Banshee's Curse, it's just the Banshee Curse. All right, I'm gonna have to chew on that for a while we go through this. So the description. For generations, your family has been haunted by a banshee. No one quite remembers how or when it was offered. Oh, excuse me. No one quite remembers how or when it was offended, but it has persisted. Your bloodline has always been the focus of this banshee. You were the first of your kin to see its boons, rather than just the curse they all thought it to be. You can now draw on its power. Doing so seems to pacify the banshee. It pushes you forward towards a goal. You can't say for certain what it wants, but you have the strangest feeling it has to do with why this being has connected itself to your lineage. Perhaps you can solve the mystery with its help. All right, that's actually really an interesting type of lore. So while this sounds really interesting, like I will say immediately, this gives me some really great insights to what this could be. The few things that I have, like the few initial contentions or hesitations I'm having, is that you call it a banshee, so we're talking about like an entity. You mentioned that it's been haunting the family, so I get why there's the bloodline and the sorcerer part, but now you're drawing off of it, you're feeding off of it, which I guess it would explain the sorcery aspect. It's going a little bit outside the bounds of the traditional sorcerer, excuse me, which is fine. But I think what I'm wondering is, when raw with lore, right? I always say this, guys, raw with lore. When you try to apply this either universally or in a setting, you know, the mindset I always try to understand things with is this supposed to be a one in a million, once in a lifetime, once in a generation, once in a universe thing? Or is this something that could exist in multiples? And this is something that I am a big, it's just one of the big steps that I always take whenever I'm homebrewing, especially when I'm creating and expanding High Point. Because when I'm trying to understand whether or not I want to document something or let it be available to people, the first thing I really have to ask myself is like, if this is not going to be a consistent thing, you know, if it's not going to be something that any character can come into my world and just, you know, pick up anytime they want, I'm probably not going to, you know, full on document it or make it available. It's probably just going to be something that people run into and experience as they do. But when I think of stuff like this, where we're making a subclass, right? When I think of a class, you know, this would be fine for a background if it's a one-time thing, right? But when you think of stuff like this as a class, it typically to me indicates either something that the person strove to be or was already predisposed to do, right? Like, again, we've talked about this before, you know, on our episode of like, what is a class? Like, what are classes? And in that episode, we talked about the fact that they are so much more and they are only one piece. But thinking of the idea that classes aren't just things that you get, but it's what you were either predisposed to do or it's what you strive to be. You know, someone who is athletic, athletic, good with weapons, and is aggressive and wants to get in fights tends to be a fighter. It's not that all fighters are like that, and not all people that are like that become fighters, but it tends to be that those two things go hand in hand when you think of, you know, what the character can do and what the class means for that character, right? It's a whole concept of their life, you know, the idea of what they've studied and what they are into, their hobbies, their interests, their likes. A class isn't something that people do for a job. A class is what they embody by the things that they've enjoyed, right? You know, you don't just become a fighter just because you think it's a cool idea. A fighter is your lifestyle, right? It's just part of who you are. The fighter isn't something that you claim to be, right? Characters in game aren't walking around and being like, well, I'm a mage and they're a fighter. It's just when you got together and you're a group of people, one person can do magic and one person has a sword and one person has, you know, a full set of armor and one person just really doesn't like people and doesn't like to be seen and really doesn't like to talk and is always in the shadows and would just rather, you know, take people's money when they're not looking, right? Like, they're not going to call themselves those things. They might call themselves a thief, but the idea of them, the class is just what they're doing, right? It's literally the role that they're playing. I think we sometimes forget that role play isn't always acting, but role play is literally fitting the role. And that's what part of a class is, right? The class is just the brand of actions that your character is going to be taking. So when I think of something like this, and we're talking about this banshee has been, you know, terrorizing your family and it's going to turn you into a sorcerer, you know, for me, I break classes into one of two phases. Either it's something that you were striving to become, or it's something that you are just innately all about, right? Take a regular sorcerer, for instance. They are born with the ability to do magic in their blood. Whereas with wizards, you typically see that they chose the life of study in order to understand how to control magic. Fighters typically either had a background in armies, or they had a background in the town guard, or they wanted to learn how to sword fight, right? These are the types of ways that pushed the character role onto the person, but again, not so much something that's a conscious decision. So when you look at the aspect of whether it's something that's to be strived for or something that innately pushes that character into that role, regardless of which direction you choose, you have to, I always try to look at what is the replicability of that, right? In terms of, in my world, if I have, you know, fighters, right? There's tons of people who, you know, can't quite make the town guard, or don't quite make the army, or veterans of the army who get out and don't have anything better to do, so become mercenaries. You know, for me, there's a lot of reasons I can justify why someone becomes a fighter, and all across, you know, the landscape of High Point. You know, mages make sense. There's magic users everywhere in High Point. Druids, people who are attuned to nature, they're going to be found all across High Point. So there's a lot of reasons why I can justify like various classes, but sometimes you get across something where it's like, how likely is this to have propagated across, you know, a setting, right? And that's not a bad thing if it's only meant to be like one of a kind. Like if you choose as a DM to say, hey, this is a one of a kind subclass, which I think is actually something that I wish Kage was here to talk about this with me. That's actually something I really wish would be a thing. Is when when we create items, when we create spells, when we create classes, it would be fascinating if they had a built-in like marker or identifier that said this is intended to be a once in a lifetime, a once in a generation, a once per game setting, right? Like in Druids, we did this in the history of Druids, where the Druids had a hierarchy, and originally it was decided that there could only be one like top Druid, period, in a game setting, just one. In the entire setting, not the planet, not your town, just one, period. And that's where I'm thinking, like, we don't have that anymore. We don't have any way to mark this and say, hey, if you're running this in your game setting, only one player can have it. Or you can only, if you have this as a prominent NPC in your campaign, a player can't play this, right? Because then something like that would just not only be really interesting to run, like a self-inflicted limitation, if you would. I think that would be really fascinating as a game mechanic. But when I see this, it's like, what is the likelihood that multiple people would have been haunted by a banshee long enough to become a sorcerer? And that's where I'm like, you know, at first, warlock sounded almost better. Like you get haunted long enough where you finally just give in and you're like, what do you want? They're like, you know, do my bidding. And then you get the exchange. Would kind of make more sense, because then the same banshee could literally do this to multiple families. And then I would justify the Banshee Curse being the same banshee. But when I think of this as this banshee has been haunting this family, I can't imagine I would say this banshee would haunt multiple families. So then what's the lore? And then again, I guess I'm almost answering my own question, because then if there's multiple banshees doing this across, you know, all of High Point, right? Then what's pulling all of the banshees to do this, right? Like, what is causing the banshees to haunt these people so long that they generate a individual with power that then they can have a discussion with and have an exchange, right? Almost like, because this is really that borderline between a sorcerer and a warlock, because you're pulling energy off the banshee, but the banshee is almost encouraging you to do so in order to accomplish something. So it is that fine line between sorcerer and warlock, but it's also now I'm really having to dig deep and be like, well, then there would really have to be some lore behind what's pushing multiple banshees to do this, right? Like, why would this be something that could happen more than once? Which would be a really fascinating campaign concept, right? Like if a character or a player wanted to do this during a campaign, or if you had like a one shot, or, you know, a set campaign where everybody was given their characters, you could add this one in and then have them meet NPCs that are similar to them. And then that could be part of the plot point of figuring out why are all of these banshees, you know, haunting these people. And not all of the haunts obviously get special powers, right? Like you find tons of families that are being haunted, but your character, this one character, is the only one that got powers from it, right? So I could see this being done in a lot of different ways. I think my biggest hesitation is it's a little bit of a stretch unless you really have a whole in-game campaign reason that can't be resolved, because if it gets resolved, then nobody can be this class again, right? So unless it's a one shot or an isolated campaign, or if it's something that just can't be resolved, I'm having a hard time stretching the idea that this could be done a multitude of times in the same universe. And that's just a hard thing for me when I think of a class, because a class, out of all things, should be super open and universal to I think anything in the realm, because then otherwise it's just what one person did, and then you basically just made an NPC. If that's making sense to y'all. So I think that's my just initial knee-jerk reaction. Is it does give me a lot to think about. I am really intrigued, but my hesitation is in wondering if it should have been a warlock over a sorcerer, because of the ability to explain how you would have multiple Banshee Curse individuals, you know, in the same universe. But I do like this photo. This is a dope photo. I don't know if Des found this online, generated it via AI. We don't have a... I don't have a link, so it doesn't look like it was outside artist that we would know of. But yeah, I do like it. You know, part of me is wondering, like, again, I'm trying to get used to the idea that this is a banshee that has plagued the family. I think if I wanted to keep it that way, what I would also do to help make it sell better is, instead of that you were feeding off of it, it would almost be interesting that, you're in ancient times, like, you tried to, like, your family was cursed for trying to summon a banshee, right? And your family was cursed by one for centuries, for generations. And it was it got so bad that it, like, tainted your blood. Until, like, your parents or, something, like someone married or had a child with, like, let's say a paladin or something, and that broke, like, the line of curse, and now you have that, like, special blood in you or something. I think I would not necessarily say to push it more into the, cliche sorcerer origin, but again, the idea that you're making a pact with this thing and feeding off of it, it just, I don't know if it really makes sense for something that I would see more than once. But again, maybe I'm not seeing the full thing. Maybe we'll get more of that as we read into it. Curious if Des would say that these are part of it, if this is just something that they found in terms of a cool image, or if this, like, embedded stuff in the skin is actually, like, part of some sort of development as you, like, accept the powers. But we have an expanded spell list. The Banshee lets you choose from an expanded spell list expanded list of spells when you learn a sorcerer spell. The following spells are added to the sorcerer spell list for you. Banshee magic. So at first level, you get Cause Fear and Dissonant Whispers. Second level, you get Gentle Repose and Pass Without Trace. Ooh, I like that one. Level 3, you get Bestow Curse and Speak with Dead. Level 4, you get Phantasmal Killer and Shadow of Moil. And 5th level, you get Negative Energy Flood and Raise Dead. I'm liking the sound of all of these. I'm not familiar with every single one, but based on the ones that I do know, this is really fascinating. And again, I'm still kind of getting torn because now we're talking about summoning, and we're talking, like, a lot of this stuff. Again, I'm wondering if this is starting to feel more like a warlock than it is a sorcerer. But I don't know. Maybe you could say, like, the Banshee is an ancestor that's been, plaguing you, and you were the first person to be able to, like, understand them, and then they were able to, because you're, like, the reincarnate. Ooh, that could have been a better explanation. The Banshee is a ancestor of yours. You were their reincarnation, and therefore your family has been haunted all of this time as it waits for its reincarnation. You were that reincarnation, and therefore the Banshee possesses you. And therefore you are now a sorcerer at birth because it possessed you in order to basically push you and do all of this stuff. And that's how you're harnessing the power. That would be a way I would accept it. I think I would like that warlock with extra spell slots. I mean, yeah. So I think I would like the explanation better if it was more like that. If you could tie it more into why it would be a Banshee. I like the idea of an ancestor repossessing or attempting to repossess and infuse their power into what is essentially their reincarnation, generations later. That would be really interesting because it's not like taking over and their knowledge. It's just they were waiting for the body to a body to be born and ready in order to come back to full power. We had a question in chat from Aki. What is Shadow of Moil? Shadow of Moil is a 4th level necromancy spell. It takes 1 action to cast. It is a range of self. It takes verbal, somatical, and material components, which is an undead eyeball encased in a gem worth at least 150 GP. The duration is concentration up to 1 minute. Flame-like shadows wreath around your body until the spell ends, causing you to become heavily obscured to others. The shadows turn dim light within 10 feet of you into darkness, and bright light in the same area to dim light. Unlike until the spell ends, you have resistance to radiant damage. In addition, whenever a creature within 10 feet of you hits you with an attack, the shadows lash out at that creature, dealing 2d8 necrotic damage. That is pretty damn awesome. That reminds me, there was a old spell that this reminds me of. Similar name too. I am blanking on the name of that, but there's a second edition spell that's very similar to this. I think the only thing it's missing is it did the tentacles, but it didn't engulf you in dim light. So I actually kind of like that extra addition. But the tentacles basically protecting you, I do remember that from an older spell. Would that really be a common enough ingredient? So that's where I guess the idea, because it's necromancy, this is one of those ideas where an undead eyeball is, I guess when you're using this kind of magic, it's intended that you're going to be doing necromantic stuff. So being around undead wouldn't necessarily be uncommon for you. Now, is it common as in, is the average person supposed to pick this up? I would definitely say no. This is probably one of those intended items or magical components that you're intended to upkeep yourself. And this is kind of, one of the problematic aspects of the way that 5th edition has done things is you don't really have that kind of upkeep anymore. So stuff like that, the idea of these really unique components, they do kind of fall to the wayside in the sense that, how often are you game playing getting an undead eye and then putting it into a gem, because it's encased in a gem, right? So there's a lot of ways that you can role play that out, but it's like, do you know gem cutting, or are you buying gems with an eyeball sized socket, right? And then there's the other aspect too of how fresh does the eye have to be? Do you have the permanence spell? Can you cast permanence on an undead eye to make sure that it preserves and doesn't continue to decay into mush while you're holding on to it for, 2 more days while you're traveling in the desert? Like there's a lot of questions about, special material components that I don't know if I haven't read the 5th edition DMG regarding spell components, and if there's any variable rules. I'd be really interested to know if they have anything specific to how DMs should go about specifics like this. Do you intend it to just be a roll? Do you have them gameplay it out? Because for something like that, like great, pointing it out was great, because an undead eye, that's not just I guess you also have to question, what is an undead eye? Does the person have to be dead when you cut it out? Or does it have to be an eyeball from specifically an undead creature? Because that, in most game settings, that right there would be a huge detour, right? You'd either have to go grave robbing, you'd have to be able to summon undead, or you'd have to have a location on the map locally that accesses undead. So I'm really curious about that. Okay, so, and Lucifer says that if there's a component that has a gold cost, the player has to make a point to acquire it. And I usually like that. So even if they have the spell focus, okay. And I don't mind that. I definitely think that the rarer the item, the more I will put it on the player to go out and find said item. I just realized I wasn't zoomed in on this. So I will definitely say that I absolutely agree that the rarer the component, the more that they will have to go and the harder it will be to obtain. Something also that I pointed out too, I had mentioned recently, when I say recently, I had mentioned just a minute ago that this was feeling very much warlocky. It is a warlock spell already. So I'm definitely, I'm on the right path with saying that this is a warlock vibe. But yeah, interesting. That one was definitely an interesting spell. What were some of these other ones? Phantasmal Killer, Bestow Curse is great. Pass Without Trace is good. Negative Energy Flood is the other one that I wasn't 100% familiar with. No, up here. Oh, search is unavailable. Okay. Well, one moment. There it is. Negative Energy Flood is a Warlock Wizard spell. So again, not even a sorcery spell, which is crazy that this is being added on, which I mean, not crazy is in a bad way, just it is definitely pushing the bounds of like what I was saying before, that borderline between sorcerer and warlock. So Negative Energy Flood, verbal and material, a broken bone in a square of black silk. Okay, that's not that bad for components. It's one action, 60-foot range, instantaneous. You send ribbons of negative energy at one creature you can see within range. Unless the target is undead, it must make a Constitution saving throw, taking 5d12 necrotic damage on a failed save, or half as much damage on a successful one. A target killed by this damage rises as a zombie at the start of your next turn. The zombie pursues whatever creature it can see that is closest to it. Statistics for the zombie are in the monster manual. If you target an undead with this spell, the target doesn't make a saving throw. Instead, roll 5d12. The target gains half the total as temporary hit points. So this actually is really interesting, Lucifer, based on your recent your recent post in the homebrewing channel about zombies, because the fact that this doesn't dictate it will attack an enemy, just the nearest creature, adding your additions to a zombie for the infection would make this 10 times like crazier in a combat. Like it would literally make almost everybody focus on this thing quickly before it like started turning everything, especially, oh my gosh, can you imagine? Oh man, I just realized something, dude. Can you imagine having negative energy flood against like a DM who thought that they were gonna be like super just like, you know, like annoying, and sent out like 20 minions or 30 minions, and then you had this and you were just like zombie, 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 and then they just started attacking each other. Like even without infectious, if you hit like a minion in the middle of a bunch of minions, it would literally just be a cannibalization from the inside. That would mess up a DM's plans really quickly for this one. But then again, this would, yeah, because this would just outright kill almost any minion. But the fact that it would just keep killing other minions. But then again, you would need the infectious part, because the other minions would probably defend itself and kill the infected minion pretty quickly. So you'd probably need the infectious part to actually make it really bad. All right, so yeah, I like these spells. It's making me question where we're gonna go with this. You know what I mean? I'm really not sure the direction we're headed, but we'll see how this goes, and we'll see how we feel about it being a sorcerer at the end of all of this. Because man, can you imagine if you're gonna multi-class with this one and try to do a coffee lock with this? Upcast it so it's AoE. Ooh, yeah. I like that idea. Turn it from like a 60-foot like length to a 30-foot but 15-foot wide cone or something like that. Cut the distance in half, but then cone it out so it's an A, like something like that. That would be interesting. But yeah, I'm really not sure where this is gonna go. I'm still hopeful that we will understand more about the purpose behind it being a sorcerer, because I'm still not sure I 100% am sold on it being a sorcerer. All right, so first level abilities. I don't have Kage here to discuss the standard sorcerer builds, and I don't know. Let's see. One moment. Classes. Shouldn't be that difficult to do it myself. So we're looking at sorcerers. All right, so real quick, you get all the core sorcerer traits, at level 1. Getting the sorcerer level features, blah, blah, blah. So you get your spell casting, which is, you know, basically their bread and butter, not having to prep or anything else like that. They get their whole list of spells, basically just getting to figure out which ones that they're gonna, that they're gonna cast. They get their cantrips, they get their spell slots. Prepare the list of your spells from their entire spell list of level +1 spell that are available to you. They get their spellcasting abilities, their spellcasting focus, and get their sorcery points. They get their meta magics. Oh yeah, that's always the one thing that I do forget for the sorcerers. They get their meta magics. So being able to modify their spells as they upgrade or as they level up. So there's your meta magic, and we're not going to worry about the draconic stuff. Okay, so most of that was just going to be all right, so you get your innate sorcery, you get your meta magic, sorcery subclass is going to be next. Okay, so pretty straightforward. All right, so at first level, okay, so okay, yeah, that's right, because you don't technically start your okay, no worries. So this is interesting. So okay, so that is actually something that I'm glad I did this for, because as a normal sorcerer, you get your spellcasting and your innate sorcery at level 1, and you get your meta magic at level 2 and your font of magic, but you don't technically get your subclass until level 3. So this one is actually technically bypassing the level 3 initiation of your subclass. So we're actually beginning this subclass at level 1. That is not standard for a sorcerer, so that's interesting. Okay. So at level 1, you get Horrific Visage. Having a Banshee as a defining feature of your power comes with some odd reactions. Being able to simply perceive your power does odd things to others. Okay, I was thinking like we were going to be thinking about like, you know, nightmares or you see ghosts or something, you know, but once per day as an action, a creature of your choice must make a wisdom saving throw against your spell save DC. On a failed save, they are frightened of you for the next 24 hours. On a success, they question what they saw and become cautiously curious about you. This may result in them approaching you, asking others about you, or even just avoiding you out of fear. Interesting. Okay, so you kind of just have this odd aura. So, my first instinct is that it's like, I don't want to make this like a bad thing. Like, I don't want to make this like a big detriment, but it is basically saying that this is a detriment. Like, I'm wondering whether or not this should be something that they have control over, but I don't know if it would be better to say that this is just going to guaranteed happen every single day. It's almost just like, yeah, it's kind of just like a buildup of all of the weird stuff that you are, that you can just kind of like hone it on one individual. So basically you just get the free frightened spell. It's basically just casting frightened on somebody. It sounds like. Or okay, so you just basically give someone the frightened. So there's not really a frightened spell, but or it would basically be like the fear spell. But that would, yeah, maybe it would be the fear spell. Third level spell, 1 action, 1 minute. This one's each creature. So okay, so this is just one creature, which makes it a lot different. Okay, that's not terrible. Once per day, you can make a creature frightened of you. Otherwise, they just become curious about you. Yeah. Part of me just wants to make there to be a bigger downside, because there's really no downside to the person, right? It's like, you know, it's I guess it doesn't really have to come with the downside though. You know what I mean? Like, I guess it's just, is this too much at first level? Maybe that's where I'm kind of like hung up a little bit, is just a little bit. What's going on, Hoylepa? What's going on, Soul? How y'all doing today? We are going over a brand new subclass from Dez called the Banshee Curse. This is a sorcerer subclass. We're still trying to figure out if it fits with sorcerer. It's definitely much more of a warlock feel for me so far. Oh, I said that wrong. There we go. I don't know what is going on with the point stuff. Hopefully that worked. All right, so yeah, I don't know. What do you like, chat? What do you guys think? Is being able to once per day inflict the frightened condition as an action, like basically kind of having that as a free action once per day, is it too much at first level? Because it's really not that overpowering, right? Like in a fight, the best thing it's going to do is defend you. It's not really going to give you, like, the party an immense amount of combat advantage. It's not going to give an immense amount of roleplay advantage, and it could lead into some good plot point fixes. I mean, even at that low of level, frightening an enemy, I guess, yeah, later down the road, that would be quite clutch. I think that would be a great ability down the road, but I don't know, maybe at early levels, it's not really that dangerous, because you're dealing with such low level characters anyway. Just the resting witch face. Yeah. I think, yeah, the fact that it really doesn't grant you that much combat advantage, it's really more of like just a last ditch effort to protect yourself. I could let that go at level 1. It is interesting that though that this is breaking the idea behind typically sorcerers not getting anything from their subclass to level 3. So I am kind of liking it breaking the mold here. All right, so that was Horrific Visage. Also at level 1 we get Ghastly Movement. This connected ghoul of yours never seems to set foot on any ground and seems to expect you to follow suit. You can now hover. You no longer have the need to step on solid ground. Your movement speed remains the same. So basically you're never touching the ground, but you're not flying. And if you're knocked prone, you're still technically not on the ground. I need to actually look up more about specifically what hover does. Nope, that's not helpful. Okay. So some creatures can hover, as noted by their stat block, and some spells and other effects grant the ability to hover. Hovering while flying prevents you from falling in certain circumstances. So hovering prevents you from falling if you're flying. You can stay aloft. Okay, so when you're flying, if you fall, if you've been incapacitated or prone condition, you stay aloft in those circumstances if you can hover. So, Lucifer, help me out here. How does this affect? Paint me a picture. How does this affect a non-flying creature? Like, I mean, the first instinct, like the first thing that comes to my mind is like pulling a Wile E. Coyote. If I stepped on like the edge of a cliff and I fell backwards, would I just not fall off the cliff and I would just lay down on the air? Like, that's the first thing that comes to mind. But like, if this is basically saying that like, it's not levitating, right? Levitate is something different. Levitate, is levitate on here? I think levitate is actually indicative of being off the ground, and things like, I think levitate is required for things like not being afflicted by rough terrain. But hover doesn't have a move mechanic. It says your movement's the same, but am I wrong in thinking that it even though it says their movement's the same, it doesn't mean that they're off the ground. It just means that they're not in contact with it. Is that so? Levitate is a second. Okay, one creature or loose object of your choice you can see within range rises vertically 20 feet and remains suspended there. Okay, so it's not levitate either. Wile E. Coyote was a crazy example because he could hover until he looked down. Oh yeah, no, you're absolutely right. I had that wrong. But that would be the idea, right? Yeah, hover without looking down. Now that would be a hilarious, like, not joke, but that would actually be a hilarious like attribute to have on a character, is like you can hover as long as you don't look down. That would be absolutely funny. What was the class feature again? So this is ghastly movement. So this connected ghoul of yours never seems to set foot on any ground and seems to expect you to follow. You can now hover. You no longer have to step on solid ground. Your movement speed remains the same. So I think what they're indicating here is they're trying to imply that you aren't in contact with the ground. But the problem is, at least with using hover, I think is their problem number one. But problem number two is I think that are they trying to indicate, like, okay, let's look at a Banshee. Maybe it's the answer is in Banshee. Like, is there a mechanic that wraiths and banshees don't touch the ground? I mean, this isn't Phasmophobia, but I'm trying to figure out. Any of these free? I don't think any of these are free. But I mean, regardless if it's the right word, I think the intent is that they aren't in contact with solid ground, but we don't have a how much off the ground they are. So it's like, and they're not saying that that it stops them, because this doesn't say that hover stops them from receiving difficult terrain, right? This doesn't say that they overcome difficult terrain. It just says you no longer need to step on solid ground. So is this trying to indicate that you don't sink on non-solid ground? So is this trying to indicate you don't sink on water or quicksand or sludge? Could that be the logic behind this? Is with hover, is you still have to be on ground. It just doesn't have to be solid ground. But that doesn't make sense, because it says that it's the ghoul doesn't set foot on any ground. But you would think that that's because it's an apparition. It doesn't have feet. It floats. So are we trying to say that you float and that? So what mechanical advantage? Because the only mechanical advantage I can see of doing that would mean that you overcome all difficult terrain. But if you get, and that doesn't make any sense, because you get Pass Without a Trace at second level. So why give them Pass Without a Trace if this overcomes difficult terrain? And if you're not touching the ground, if I'm not touching the ground, I'm not leaving a path. And if I'm not leaving a path, I don't need Pass Without a Trace. So these two are contradictory. Like, this is a waste. This is absolutely a waste unless Pass Without Trace covers your buddies. Does Pass Without Trace cover the party? No, it's only self. Oh, no. Each creature you choose within 30 feet of you, including you, get a bonus to dexterity and can't be tracked by magical means. So maybe So pass without trace means you can't be detected by magical means. Okay, so it doesn't overwrite the need for pass without trace. I'm just I don't know why I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around what does this actually give you? Like I don't think it's intended to overcome difficult terrain. So the only thing I can see this gives you, like, would this indicate that you don't set off traps? Like if there's a tripwire or a pressure plate, is this indicating that you wouldn't set those off? It could it could very well just be an aesthetic thing. Maybe I'm just being too pedantic on the terminology. I like words. I like to take it into concept of what it actually says. So maybe I'm taking it too literally, but I'm just trying to figure out what does hover do for a non-flying creature in this scenario. And if it is just cosmetic, I don't know how you would represent that. Like, are your feet off the ground? Do you look like you're walking? Do you look like you're just hovering? Because that could cause that could cause roleplay issues. Like you could have NPCs point that out that you don't walk. But then it just makes me wonder, like, you know, if you're walking on snow, like, do you not leave footprints? You know, do you not leave, like, again, pass without trace, but do you not leave anything behind? Do you not do pressure plates? What if you walked past a tripwire? Like, do you go over the tripwire? So that's just where it's like, it's really weird because it's not quite a mechanic that is utilized if you're not a flying creature. So I have no idea. What's for, okay, so I think it just means that they hover like an inch or two off the ground, not making contact, but just sort of floating there. So you think that they wouldn't do pressure plates, which, I mean, again, typically, yeah. If you're floating off the ground, I would agree, if you're taking it that way, that you wouldn't do pressure plates. And you think it's on and off? I mean, it does say you can now hover. You no longer need to, not that you don't. So that's interesting. So yeah, I guess that really would be the idea that you can. So maybe what he's trying to indicate here is that with hover, as long as you have a surface beneath you, you can cross it. And now it says don't step on solid ground. I really wish Des was here because I want to know what Des would call if there was a body of water. Like, let's say just a 1 foot deep body of water. Would hover allow you to not touch it? Or would you still only be able to hover over solid ground? So I'm just, yeah, not 100% sure. I really wish he was here for that one. But as long as you can go over pressure plates or something like that, I think it would make a lot more sense than just to be aesthetic. Stop hovering. Man, I haven't seen that movie in like 3 years. Thanks for reminding me for that. I have got to look that movie up again. Okay, so far we've been able to frighten somebody and we can hover, which means we may or may not be able to go over non-solid ground as long as it's there. And we may or may not be able to go over pressure plates, or it's just a really creepy way of walking without looking like you're making footsteps. Because that could also just be intimidating. So a lot of different options there. Let's go back to the sorcerer class. I like how they already have the 2024 Player's Handbook available on D&D Beyond. All right. So what are we looking at? After 4th, we get ability score improvement at 4th, and then at 6th, we get the Sorceress Origin feature, which is going to be this. So at 6th level, we get the Banshee Howl. The howl of a Banshee is a terrible thing, one that you can now inflict upon your foes. Interesting. Okay. As a bonus action, You can spend up to a number of sorcery points equal to your proficiency bonus. Up to, okay, as a bonus action, you can spend up to a number of sorcery points equal to your proficiency bonus to make a ranged spell attack against one creature within 60 feet of you that you can hear. Okay. So on a bonus action, a number of sorcery points up to your proficiency bonus to make a ranged spell attack to a creature that you can hear. On hit, the target takes a number of d8 equal to the amount of sorcery points spent in psychic damage. So you spend sorcery points, you hit a creature that you can hear within 60 feet, and they will take 1d8 of psychic damage for every sorcery point you put into it. Interesting. I don't dislike it. Like out the gate as an ability, I don't dislike it. However, like part of me wants to make an argument that this could have been an opportunity to make this similar to like a hunter's mark, because when I think of the Banshee scream, I think of the lore, like the traditional lore behind like a Banshee always screams, you know, like either right before or right as someone passes. And I was almost thinking of using it that way to where like in combat, you know, as a bonus action, if, you know, an enemy is felled in combat, as a bonus action, you can do the Banshee howl and like mark a target, and then like damage against them is doubled, you know, kind of like the marked next for death. I think something like being able to mark someone for extra damage, or even able to like, I think that's where my mind would have gone, is tagging someone like after an enemy is felled or right before they're felled, and being able to do like extra damage to just like guarantee that they go down, I think would have been my direction. Like the 60 feet that you can hear, I honestly don't know if the 60 feet that you can hear makes any sense, because it's more about, can they hear you, right? Like just because you can hear them doesn't quite necessarily mean that they can hear you. But I mean, just 60 feet of you, I think still 60 feet that you can see, because you still have to be aware of them, right? But then again, it could have also been an AoE. Like it's a Banshee scream. Doesn't necessarily have to target a single individual. I wouldn't have minded this to be like, start at 6th level, let the Banshee howl be any enemy within 60 feet of you, make it a 1d6 damage for every sorcery point, and then let that die of damage go up as you level up. So it could start as a d6 at level 6, become, you know, and basically just like every 2 levels let it go up, or like at level 10 go to a d8, at level 15 go to a d10. That I think would have been better than targeting an individual. I mean, hell, I even would have been okay if this targeted indiscriminately, you know, just any creature within 60 feet of you took the damage. You know, you could even throw in a saving throw at that point. Could have been any creature within, you know, 60 feet of you on a failed save takes that much in psychic damage, and then half on a save. Hell, if you're going to do that too, I mean, one extra step, you should have made this a save to where even if it's the one creature, you know, they take half damage on a save, full damage on a failed save, and they're deafened for like 1d6 rounds. So that way it would be, you can't use it on the same person until they're not deafened anymore, which would kind of be a unique limiter. But also on top of that, it would also just cause an extra aspect of combat control, being able to deafen a target on top of it. So a couple different ways to go about it. It's a unique way of saying that, you know, that you can hear them within 60 feet of you. It is definitely a unique approach to it. But not the approach I would have gone, at least with the name for the Banshee howl. I think I would have gone a different direction, like again, like a hunter's mark kind of thing, where extra damage is done just because you've marked them for death, is kind of the way that I would think it. But again, as just a general damage output, I don't mind it. I think I would like to see this be able to go up in damage as we level up later. So maybe if we're going to start at a D8, at least give me a D10 or a D12 by level 15 is where I would like to see this. Oh, I did read that wrong. Thank you. It does say that can hear you, not that you can hear. I read that wrong. So it is a creature that can hear you within 60 feet. And yeah, I guess that would just have to be something that you and the DM decide. Again, interesting that you have to choose what creature can hear you. I think an AoE might sound a little bit better. Shorten it to 20 feet in range for the trade-off with the 1 damage die reduction per 10 feet for... Ooh! Okay, so full damage at 20 feet and then a full damage die drop off. I mean, hell, I wouldn't even mind like a percentage drop off, like full damage, because then you don't want to get into too many different rolls, because then you'd have to, roll a D8 and then a D7 and then a D6 for everybody that trails off. You could just do anybody within 20 feet takes full damage. Anybody within 20 or anybody within 20 feet is full damage. 30 to 40 feet is half damage, and then beyond that is no damage or something like that. Because then you can do 1 roll of damage, and then it's just a drop off depending upon how far away you are from the source. But I think an AoE would have been better. But again, I like the usage of the Banshee Howl. I'm glad that you brought that in from the Banshee lore. Not the way I would have done it, but I don't think the using it as an attack is a issue by any means. Just drop the highest damage die every 10 feet could do that too. So yeah, however you want to simplify the math. I mean, I'm always concerned with just how much more does it complicate the gameplay. I mean, I've definitely overcomplicated things before, but sometimes you have to kind of question, like, does the extra work add to the actual gameplay, or does it just make it to where it sounds like it works better? But okay, that's what we get for level 6. More damage output, which again, if we are dealing with being a sorcerer too, we should be expecting damage output, right? We are a spellcaster, and we are expected to be on the more aggressive side of things, even if we're trying to be support. But we are more on the offensive, even if we're offensive support. So I'm liking the fact that this is very attack heavy, with still maintaining that theme, even if it's not the same direction I would have taken the theme. And let's go until level... Okay, so 6 to 14. Again, this is not a comment on Dez. This is a comment on Wizards of the Coast. This is fucking bullshit. That is too far of a... That is too much. 6 to 14th level is far too long to leave me just, yep, that's what you are now. Deal with it for, what is that, 8 levels? You're just 8 levels. You are on your own to figure it out and hopefully work your character the best way that you can, because otherwise, it's like everyone else is going to be customizing and getting further along, and you're just going to be sitting there. Like, anybody who gets anything from like between 8th and 12th level, it's like you're just kind of sitting there as is. I do not like that they do this with certain subclasses. This is, I know everyone just follows it, but I hate that Wizards of the Coast makes subclasses that just stagnate for so long. And then the fact is, this is it. It's only 14th and 18th level. That's like, it's fucking done. They still don't do a capstone at 20th level, which we've talked about before. But this can just feel so bad. This is like, you think about that, that's 8 levels, and you're thinking a minimum of 2 games, if not 6 games, 2 to 6 games per level, 8 levels. How long until you forget what you were doing with this character? Like, my God. What kind of party would you build around this kind of main character? As a main character, interesting. If you were to build a party around, so far what we've learned in terms of just being able to have this ghostly, the ghastly movement, the horrific visage, the Banshee Howl, I honestly don't know to build around this. So you do a lot of damage. You can scare someone to keep yourself defended. So the only party I would try to build around this would be something along the lines of like one of the kind of parties that you tend to like, everybody can take a lot of damage, but it's best when everybody focuses on like a single target. I don't know if there's a name for that. But like the idea behind a whole party where when you go into like combat, everyone finds the toughest dude and everyone just focuses straight on them immediately. And then it's kind of one of those things where you just pick off the enemies one by one. I think this class would fit right in with that kind of party because you're able to deal very targeted amount of damage. You're also able to put enemies at a disadvantage. So your party could get into place. You can use the frightened condition to push them into your allies. So you have some combat control or crowd control and combat advantage on the battlefield. You have a lot of damage output being focused. So you'd want the rest of your party doing the same. You'd want the rest of your party crowd controlling and putting out massive damage onto the same target. So you're just basically picking them off one by one by one. I think that would be kind of the party you'd want to go for. Like a bee, yeah, exactly, like a bee swarm. Just, you know, because most parties I think tend to be either too overbalanced where everyone plays just one part, or everyone tries to be a jack of all trades. But everyone's afraid to do it, like, you know, to do this, right? Everyone wants to, you know, separate the enemies. Everyone, you know, it's like, hey, you know, the big guys go after the big guys, the small guys go after the small guys, and everyone kind of, you know, maybe distracts or anything. But a really good team and a really good team comp could do just like that, kind of a bee swarm where you roll into combat, you identify the first target, and everyone just goes for it. If you say, you know, if the leader of the party says, hey, we need to take down the mage first, everybody being able to do the mage first, right? If you had a ranger that could slow the mage so they can't keep pushing distance. So you have like a ranger that can slow them down at distance so everyone can close distance. You know, you would have everybody up armored as best that you could. Your barbarian would have unarmored defense. Maybe your mage would cast mage armor to help against any incoming attacks. You'd go down, you'd go after that mage, and then you'd choose the next target, right? And whatever your methodology was, the idea would be you just kind of ignore the non-target, because otherwise, you know, the team comp would fall apart. And that's where you would look at your ASIs versus your feats and try to find a lot of complementary stuff, right? You'd want somebody that has sentinel, with a pole arm. You definitely want anybody that can get, any feats that would give you additional attacks or additional movement, things like that would allow the entire party to move as one unit instead of 6 individual people attempting to, coordinate. That's where I think I would go as a full party build. Yes, this could also be a would-be lich, or something that kind of begins the lich lifestyle, I guess you could say. Wouldn't be far off. Okay, so with that, that was at 6th level. Get nothing at 7th. You get an ability score improvement at 8th. Nothing at 9th. You get a meta magic, another meta magic at 10th. And then another ability score at 12th. So it's like that's what I'm talking about. Like, you got 2 ability scores and 1 more meta magic, which that meta magic is not necessarily specific to your subclass. It's just a sorcerer thing. So again, you get nothing. That again, subclassing is all about specializing. It's all about pushing your character and your build into something very, very specific, something that you want. For 6, 7, 8 levels, you are doing nothing but role play. That's all you get with this is pure role play development. Beyond that, you're on your own. I look at this and it's like, this is like the ultimate feels bad. Like, this would stop me from wanting to play a sorcerer, just simply because for that, I can't even think about how many gaming sessions that would be of just slogging through with only what I've got. And I just have to try for 12, 19 gaming sessions to be creative until I eventually get the next thing that advances me. I don't understand why they thought 8 levels for a subclass made sense, especially when the subclass is supposed to, you know, characterize and specialize you. Yeah, even a class specific meta magic at 10th level would be fine. You know, even at, you know, like add just anything, just add in another sorcerer, you know, expand the spells that you get as this class. I don't know, it's just something, right? Like it feels like you're gonna wait way too long and eventually get bored with this. Oh, internet problems. Hey, no worries. We've just been kind of bitching mostly for the last half hour about the spells here. But yeah, so we went through Banshee Howl. We think it should be an AoE. It definitely sounds like it would be a better AoE with maybe a decreasing amount of damage based on how far away you are. And then we just went through what you're going to get, which is nothing until 14th level. So now back to 14th level, you get Spectral Movement. This is going to be from our subclass. We get Spectral Movement. So this Spectral Affliction on your bloodline is proven to be more benefit than harm. With a dark and ethereal trail, you now move through the air just as real banshees do. You gain flight speed of 40 feet. Okay, this is totally fine. I'm okay with this. I'd even add in the visual that your feet from the knees down become wispy. Like you literally look like an apparition from like the waist down. I'd be totally fine with that. Hell, I'd have been fine with this at 10th level, and then at 14th level, give me gaseous form. Like how I don't know if banshees actually get gaseous form by default, but give me something like that, right? Like give me the ability to like go through doors and shit. I would have accepted flight at 10th level for something a little bit more than what we've been seeing. Yeah, this isn't on Dez, this is just on Wizards. I forget, were we able to actually look at the Banshee? No. Oh. Is that it? Oh, there it is. So, figure out what I was looking for. Resistances, condition senses. Yes, here we go. Incorporeal movement is what I was thinking. Banshee can move through creatures and objects if they were difficult terrain. Takes force damage if you end your turn inside the object. So I would have been absolutely fine with gaining flight at 10th level and incorporeal movement at 14th level, because at this point in the game, the incorporeal movement would not have been too hard of an ask, because at this point, having that character, I mean, you're already allowing the character to overcome pressure points or pressure plates. So now you really have a character that full on can get in anywhere the party needs, becomes way more versatile. I mean, basically, with knowing that this is coming, if you take my idea that it would be getting spectral movement, getting flight at 10th level, and then getting incorporeal movement at 14th level, that basically overrides the need in the late game for something like a rogue, right? You can get in and out of places, check for enemies. Incorporeal movement would even be like, while you're moving in this state, you can't be like targeted by non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing damage, right? It would make sense that you could actually, like, while in this state, you can't be afflicted by normal means. Normal fire, things like that. That would be absolutely amazing to have. And I think it would go right into the idea that you're basically becoming the Banshee, right? I think flight's 100% okay. I just think it should have come sooner for me. And then also at 14th level, you get Cry of Casting. Okay, so this is more of the Banshee Scream. So the Banshee's Cry is a gravely misunderstood thing. You understand the pain, the anguish in it. Through that understanding, you can hear the magic in it. The magic of the cry is all you need. All spells without a spent material cost now only have a verbal... All spells without a spent material cost now only have a verbal component. Are they trying to say that all spells that were verbal and somatical now only are verbal? Because like without a spent material cost, so basically any spell that didn't require a material cost is now only verbal. So they should have just said any spell that was, yeah, interesting. So basically you're overcoming the ability, or you're overcoming the need to do your hand gestures. You just need the material and your voice. So as a sorcerer, I get it. I get the desire to want to do this, because removing the somatical, removing the hand gestures, and being able to basically cast always just with voice, as long as you have the spell component with you, I see the draw and I don't dislike it. I don't think this was the way to implement it though. I think the Banshee's Cry could have been more utilized, like I mentioned before. If the spell has a material component, so if the material component, like so in the last spell, it required a gem of a certain gold value. So this is just saying, as long as the component doesn't have a gold cost, it's now just verbal. Interesting. And that's all spells. So regardless of the spell and what it needs. So basically this is saying, as long as it doesn't have a cost to cast the spell, it's now just verbal. Interesting. So yes, even with that, I don't mind that. I don't mind that for a sorcerer, and I don't mind that this late in the game. I think it's just I think it would have been fine. I just think using the Banshee's Cry for it, I think is a missed opportunity, because I think there was just more we could have done with the Banshee Scream, but I don't dislike the idea. Being able to convert your spells to make them easier to cast, I think that's fine. It's also, I think that's fine, especially because you still have being able to cast silence. So being able to cast silence and cuts you right out of that option is totally fine with me, especially at 14th level. I think that's rock solid. So yeah, other than just, I think we could have used Banshee's Scream differently. I don't have any other critiques for that particular one. And then we get an ability score improvement at 16th level, a meta magic at 17th level, and then beyond that, an ability score at 19th level. So at 18th level, that's all we have. Yeah, so at 18th level, this is our capstone now. We get Haunted Bloodline. So with the magic of your bloodline and the full appreciation of the Banshee, you can call it to your aid. With the full appreciation of the Banshee, you can call it to your aid. The Banshee that haunted your family will now fight alongside you, for better or worse. Okay, I mean, we'll get into what interesting that they seem to fork in the idea, because I feel like we were going more in the direction of the Banshee was taking over and you were becoming the Banshee, especially like again, the lore indicated that the Banshee wanted something, which would kind of make sense that the Banshee wants a body. And so the idea that you two merge, I was kind of getting along with that, but now it's just, I don't know. I feel like at this point, this kind of loses a little bit of the lore that you were being haunted, and now it's just an ally. It's a little bit of a, almost like a anime full story kind of thing. Like I would have liked to have seen that better played out in the story than in the class build. If you're not casting silence on a bandaged sorcerer, what do you even do it? Yeah, no, I mean, realistically speaking, if you're not, straight up like shutting them down, I mean, what are you doing? Hey, what's going on, Cosmic? No worries. Thank you for showing up, though. We do appreciate it. We're kind of just getting at the end, but I hope shopping was adventurous for you. Hope you got everything that you needed. Okay, so yeah, so I'm saying so far with this first sentence, it's a little bit interesting, because I would think that we would have, I think like the story hasn't really been told so far with the subclass, right? Like we have some interesting lore bits, but it doesn't seem to make a full story. It just seems that my family was haunted. I can now basically say, I'm tired of being haunted. I'm going to take over this Banshee's power, and now I can summon the Banshee. But I'm also being turned into a Banshee, or I can like phase part with Banshee. It's very interesting. Man, you know what would have been, before we even read the rest of this, would have been really interesting is, what if instead of summoning the Banshee, this was more like a lycanthropy type of situation where at your capstone, you basically wild shape or transform into a Banshee and have all of the Banshee feats until you're like reduced to 0 hit points, and then you transform back. So that would have been interesting, more kind of like a werewolf situation where you're slowly turning into one, and then you can just fully Banshee out, get all of the benefits of a Banshee, and then turn back. I think I would have liked that a little bit more. It would have helped the idea of that of the lore buildup instead of it just kind of being a, you were haunted, but you overcame the haunting, so now it's your buddy. So interesting, but it also says for better or for worse. So let's see what that means. I'm not quite sure what for better or for worse. Oh, 2-car accident on the intersection. Jeez. Yeah, that always sucks when you have to do that. And then you had to get off early. Jesus. That sucks, man. Well, I'm glad you're home safe. Hopefully you can now relax and enjoy the rest of your night. But yeah, I'm really interested what better or for worse is going to mean. So let's get into this. They also have a Banshee write-up for us. Actually, I'm going to put that other Banshee back here. All right, so as an action, you can magically summon the Banshee that is bound to your bloodline. It appears in an unoccupied space of your choice within 30 feet of you. Okay. And I'm wondering if this is just for the sake of the lore, or if there's something intended here for the DM to be able to utilize that. Like, is this something that out of combat can I converse with? Does it know things, right? It's not just any Banshee, but it's my family's Banshee. So if I talk to it outside of combat and get some family knowledge, right? That would be really interesting. Maybe do something with the voice, like teleportation to a place where your voice can. Oh, interesting. So like if you shut them down as a sorcerer, you're saying, like, without being able to use their voice, they'd be able to like basically go somewhere where they could take themselves out of battle until they recovered. That would be kind of interesting. Almost like there's like 2 spells that I know that kind of do that. There's like one where it's like the rope trick one, I think, where you like climb the rope and then go up into like a little pocket dimension. There's a couple others that I know that are like Mordekaisen's like mansion and stuff like that, but I could have sworn there were, oh yeah, and then there's like time jump, I think, is another one where you can basically like take yourself out of combat for like 3 rounds and then just be there. Yeah, I wonder if you could add something like that to help like protect against offensive spells like that. Offensive, not offensive. Okay, so interesting. So we get to summon a Banshee that's bound to the bloodline. I really hope that means that you can talk to it in an unoccupied space within 30 feet of you. The Banshee is friendly to you and your companions, and it obeys your commands. You can determine the cosmetic characteristics of the Banshee, such as its color, its coolest features, or any visible effects of its undead power. Your choice has no effect on the game's statistics, so yeah, just basically it is yours to customize. It's interesting that it says it obeys your commands. I know why they're saying that, because that is the standard for summons, but sometimes it is fun to give a summon up to the DM and just be like, it fights on your behalf, but it is DM controlled. I will say once in a while throwing that out there is kind of fun, instead of just giving the party yet another, or the player yet another character to give. Aw, offensive. But yeah, not too bad. In combat, the Banshee shares your initiative count, but it takes its turn immediately after yours. I'll be honest, guys, I get really tired of this phrase. Like, this gets way too played out. I think summons absolutely deserve their own initiative. They're basically self-automatons. I feel like the whole thing of they get summoned and then they immediately always act right after you is just played out. You know what I mean? It's basically saying that they don't have reaction, right? That they're just pure do as they're told. And I feel like in order to give summons a little bit more life to them, being able to let them have their own initiative indicates that they are acting and reacting of their own volition, instead of, just always your decisions. Attack of the cliches. Pokénighter, what's going on, Pokénighter? Damn, everyone's showing up tonight. Any reason why 11 sorcery points are the amount you need to spend to go again? The reason for the initiative choice is due to ease of playability in 5e. That does make sense. I can see that. I haven't gotten to the end yet. I just see the 11 sorcery points at the end. So let me get to that here just a second. But yeah, for me, ease of gameplay, I understand, but there's so much that makes that 5e is done to make it easy. I really would like to see summons be a little bit more autonomous in terms of that. But I also do dynamic initiative, right? So I don't do static initiative where you only roll it once and that's what everybody does. I much prefer a dynamic initiative where every round or every turn everybody's rolling again, because for me, that's much more indicative of how a natural fight progresses, and everybody gets to potentially have the chance of being first to attack, or have essentially two rounds in a row if you're last and first. So yeah, I like changing it up a lot. Demons players often forget the out of turn units they control. Messes a lot with what should have happened. If they lose a turn, just slows down the game. Yeah, there's we've definitely talked a lot about just control of game flow and things of that sort. So I know why they do it, and I know because of the greater audience that they're trying to reach out to. I totally get why they simplify some of these things. It's just not my preference. Cosmic, have a special plan for a backup character I've set up that has a connection to your most recent submission. Oh, interesting. What was is the most recent submission is it the same subclass, or I don't remember. I don't know what your last submission was. I haven't talked to Kage about the most recent ones yet. So, but yeah, interested to see what's connected. Huelepa prefers team initiative. Simple and the fastest way for combat. I will say that dynamic initiative isn't the fastest way to do it, but overall I have found it is a very positive experience when you do have a group of players who are more or less relatively quick with their actions. They know what their characters can do. It does seem to keep the things a little bit more fresh and less stale in terms of, all right, it's my turn. I know how long I can wait now. I feel like it's also a good technique for me, at least, to keep engagement, because at any point, essentially, it could be your turn next, based off of that. But again, everybody has their preference, and initiative is one of those things where, it does change several aspects of how combat can unfold, but it's not like a pivotal thing where, changing that rule is really like a game breaking aspect, right? So initiative is one of those areas where it's like, when I play other games, I don't really mind how people do initiative. It's not a big deal in terms of who gets the advantage, depending on what, initiative type you're using. But let's see, what else did we have here? So it shows you initiative. It can move and use its reaction on its own, which I do like that. I do like that its reaction is not tied to you. But the only action it can take on its turn is the dodge action, unless you take a bonus action on your turn to command it to take another action. Again, this is one of those things where it's like, on most summons, I understand it, especially unintelligent ones, but something like this, I feel like this is unnecessary. I feel like it having a list of actions, like basically it having a list of actions it can do, like, even if you just said like it'll attack the nearest enemy, or it won't take any actions unless you are attacked, and then it will take, its action to defend you or something, right? Yeah, it requires your bonus action to control as a capstone. So it's, I'm like, I think that this could absolutely be just gotten rid of. Most summons make sense that it's only going to dodge because it's kind of just a mindless automaton, but this is the Banshee that's been plaguing your family for generations. This thing isn't dumb. this thing should have a list of actions that you just you just at your turn, you just say it does this, right? And even if you wanted to make it basic, right? Like attack, defend, you could tell it defend a player and all it will do is like get in the way of something that's trying to attack it, or it will attack something that's attacking what it's trying to defend. You can have it, go after something. Like there's so many ways that you could do this, but I feel like burning, especially like at 18 level, that bonus action is probably very valuable during combat. And to blow that action to just control your Banshee, this Banshee, like we haven't seen what the Banshee can do yet, but the Banshee better be really impactful, because if it's not, the bonus action will even feel worse. The only action if you use your bonus action to make a command, that action can be one in its stat block, which we'll look at in a second, or some other action. If you were incapacitated, the Banshee can take any action of its choice, not just dodge, but it's most likely to seek vengeance on those that have hurt you. See, so if it can do that while you're incapacitated, like I think the lore idea is that while you're not incapacitated, you're in control of it. But if it's friendly to you, you don't need to write into the lore that you have that level of control, right? Like to me, if it's friendly to me and my companions, there's no need to guarantee I have that control and that control breaks when I go down. If it can take those kind of actions, it should just take default actions. I mean, even if you just said it will only try to protect you unless you tell it otherwise, I'd be fine with that, because at least that way I know that I can go and attack one enemy and it will just watch my back. And if someone else hits me, it'll immediately attack them. Even if that was its base default, is it'll attack who attacks me. That's fine. But I shouldn't have to burn my own action to tell it what to do. It should just be able to have its own list. And especially not until I go incapacitated, where it finally becomes autonomous. The Banshee remains for 1 minute until it's reduced to 0 hit points, or until you die. Which is interesting. Incapacitated and death, not always the same thing. I don't know if I would do that. Honestly, like if you die, I would almost want to have some lore bit where if you die while the Banshee is summoned and you fail all of your like death saving throws, it consumes your body or something. Like it would just be part of the lore that's like the end of the cycle. But outside of that, like 1 minute's fine. I don't think it needs to disappear when you die. I think that would be fine for it to continue raging for its 1 minute. Still help the party. Again, this is the capstone, right? This is the thing that's been watching you. And if you were the last in the bloodline and you were the last chance it had to, achieve its goals, it's going to be fucking pissed that you're dead. And yes, it's going to want vengeance. So I think letting it and maybe that's just it. Maybe if you die when it's summoned, maybe not only does it remain for the 1 minute, but maybe then it becomes, it decides to just be, what's the word I'm looking for? Indiscriminate. So in that point, if you die and it's still summoned, it just attacks everything, because it's pissed that it's haunted this entire family line until now, and now it has to hope that you made a kid. So that would be really another interesting option, is the Banshee just goes psycho under the DM's control and just attacks everything if you die. But otherwise, anything the Banshee was wearing or carrying is left behind when the Banshee vanishes. So that's interesting. Anything the Banshee was wearing or carrying is left behind. But the Banshee doesn't come summoned with anything. So what is it going to do within the 1 minute? That's another weird way to put it. I guess if it picked up something and carried it for you across the battlefield for 1 minute, maybe that would make sense. And then finally, once you summon the Banshee, you can't do so again until 1d4 plus 1 nights have passed, unless you expend 11. Bruh, absolutely fucking not. There is no way you can justify 2 to 5 days. 2 to 5 days on a capstone ability is unjustifiable for a 1 minute capstone ability. Okay, I have to look at this creature real quick. I have to look at what it does, because unless this thing can like suck the very soul from any enemy as an action, there's no way it can be justifiable to wait that long to use it again. It just doesn't make any sense, right? Long rest, I'm fine, but there's no way otherwise. Like that's so harsh. Let's see. Different thought. What if you died? It screamed in anguish at your death and just AoE'd before it vanished like a punishment. Well, and that's like the traditional Banshee scream, right? The Banshee screams when someone dies. That would be fantastic, right? Just everybody in its AoE as it just vanishes and goes to its next host. That's actually a pretty cool idea. Instant. Oh, and on a failed save, it instantly kills. Ooh, that would be kind of dope. That would make a risk versus reward of ever summoning it, especially if you're almost about to die. That'd kind of like a nuke. I like it, but I cannot get behind 1d4 plus 1 knights. That's so harsh. Oh wait, that's the base Banshee? I'm so not familiar with this. Whale. Banshee releases a mournful wail provided that they aren't in sunlight. The wail has no effect on constructs or undead. Within 30 feet, can hear, make a DC 13. On a fail, creatures drop to 0 hit points. On success, takes 10 psychic damage. Oh, that's just their wail for once per day. No, absolutely. So that should definitely be like the guaranteed thing they do. Yeah, no, I like that. Okay. And there's where we get the horrifying visage. That makes sense. That's where we got it from. Ooh, detect life. Detect life would have been a good like ability. Okay, so let's see what this Banshee is all about, and let's see. This should just be once per long rest. Totally fine. Most capstones once per long rest. You're not going to use this combat after combat after combat, but man, you do not want to like do this. Oh yeah. Well, I wouldn't mind if you wanted to say you can do this once per long rest, or you can cast it again for a certain number of sorcery points. Yeah, 11 is definitely very odd, but I don't know. Des isn't here to let us know. But I would say this: I don't mind being able to repurchase your capstone with a certain number of sorcery points. I don't mind that idea, especially at like this late in the game. When it comes down to something like a Banshee for 1 minute, again, if you're gonna do multiple rounds of combat, like with the BBEG's second, right hand man, and then go back after the BBEG right after that. It would be kind of cool to like, if these guys are, if you know that the enemies are resistant to magic, so you haven't been casting a lot of spells directly at them, it might be kind of cool to be able to like summon that twice. So I could see an argument for it, but 11 is very interesting. There's features spells that help you make sorcery points to be exploitable, so it can be abused and spam Banshee. Yeah, I mean, and that's yeah, no, that is fair. I mean, that's kind of what you get with with most min-maxing builds. So I see what you're saying is, yeah, there's definitely a way to abuse it, but there's still only so many sorcery points that you can justifiably rack up. So you could make the number realistic for the average sorcerer, but to a point unachievable to truly spam. So there might be a way that you can balance it out. Yeah, or even just put a cap. Just say that you can only repurchase. I mean, even if you just say you can only repurchase it once, like you get one for free per long rest, and you can purchase one additional one with X number of sorcery points per long rest, and that's it, right? So at best you can get 2 in a day, something like that, right? There's a way to justify it, to make that somehow justifiable if you really wanted to like stretch the capstone aspect. Well, that's true. Technically it is, because expended spell slots. Yes, you can expend spell slots to remake it. And you also have short rests that can, be applied as well to regain sorcery points. So I think you were on to something. I think there is an argument. I'm not saying that I would do it, but I'm saying that because normally I like a capstone to be just a once per long rest, but I could see an argument for a sorcerer to be able to repurchase their capstone. Maybe not this one, but a capstone at a certain limit, like at one, you can rebuy 1 or 2 in a particular day if you want that. Because for most sorcerers, holding that many sorcery points isn't a great thing, right? That's truthfully something you either plan to do or is a last ditch effort. I don't really think a lot I think more often than not, it wouldn't even be used because you're burning your sorcery points. Unless again, you're cannibalizing your actual spell slots. So yeah, there are ways to get around it, but I think limitations would be the best way to do it. But let's get to this sorcerer. Let's see. Okay, so this is the Bloodline Banshee. So real quick, we have normal Banshee, armor class of 12, 58 hit points, flight of 40, 1, 14, 10, 12, 11, and 17 for stats. Has some good damage resistances and immunities. Has a couple condition immunities. I say a couple. It's like 8 of them. Pretty much all of them. And then it has Detect Life, Incorporeal Movement, Corrupting Touch, Horrifying Visage, and Wail. Okay. Just want to get kind of a snapshot to see how much they changed it over here. So we have an armor class of 27 versus an armor class of 12. Wow. Okay. So that's already kind of giving us an idea of why they didn't think that this should be. I think this is starting to give us an idea of why this shouldn't be summoned so often. But yeah, natural armor of 27, 120 hit points. Are you fucking kidding me? That's double what the average Banshee is just out the gate. That's double that's double the armor class, double the hit points. It's immortal. Yeah. That right there, I'm gonna give. I'm not gonna allow that. No, here we go. Yeah, 27 armor class. There's just no way. There's just no way that you can justify that for 1 minute. And 120 hit points. Like if you're even getting through that, 19d8 plus 35. Where are we getting this? This one's a 13d8. This is a 19d8, but then the third plus 35. I don't know where we're getting that. That's a lot. Okay, so we have a 1, 14, 14, 12, 12, 18 versus a 1, 14, 10, 12, 11, 17. So why the 18 in charisma? Like I get the intelligence being bumped up to 12 each. I get a constitution. I don't understand such a high dexterity and such a high charisma. I'm not. Hey, what's going on, Hecate? This is a summonable creature. This is the capstone of the subclass that we're doing right now from Dez. It's the Banshee Curse. It's a sorcerer subclass, and we're talking about the capstone right now. Basically, the lore behind this is your bloodline was your family was haunted by a banshee for generations until you were able to essentially siphon off its power, and then that's how you became a sorcerer and got all this stuff. So the capstone is that you can summon this banshee. It's only summoned for a minute, and we were kind of talking about, what this makes sense because it's summoned for a minute, and Des was saying that you can only do it once every 1d4 plus 1 nights. So basically instead of, overnight, we were like, that doesn't really make much sense. So now we're going over it and comparing it to the regular Banshee. So a regular Banshee has an armor class of 12, 58 hit points. This Bloodline Banshee has an armor class of 27 and hit points of 120. I don't mind the 120 hit points, but you can't have an armor class of 27. Even at level 18, I just think that that's been way too overzealous in unless you're just going to be throwing really tough monsters at them. I don't think you can justify that. Good point, Pokeniner. Sorcerer is charisma based, so you would want their capstone to be charisma based. I get the logic there. I don't agree with it, but I get the logic there. Can't really see the reason. Yeah, this shouldn't even come back for this as is shouldn't even come back for a whole month, right? Yeah, exactly. Now, if this was like a level 20 capstone and this was like, divine intervention level, I totally get you, right? You're basically calling an unstoppable force for 1 minute to do anything you want. Yeah, I can see why now Des thought 1d4 plus 1 days was a good reset, but I think it's unnecessary completely. You are giving them the nuke for the BBEG right here. Like this is literally a 1 minute fight with the BBEG. This is over. It's just unfair stat block. Yeah. And in the player's control, like I don't know a BBEG. I mean, yeah, it has no strength, but that doesn't matter, right? Like it's a Banshee for what we're talking about. Yeah, this is just the starting point. So let's continue. So saving throws are a wisdom +5, charisma +8, when the standard banshee is a wisdom +2, charisma +5. Resistances, the bloodline banshee is resistant to acid, fire, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical attacks. A standard banshee is resistant to acid, fire, lightning, thunder, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from non-magical damage. So that's interesting. Why reduce lightning and thunder? I'm not really sure why we get rid of lightning and thunder. Yeah, maybe just to change it up. I'm not sure. Yeah, not quite the same resistances just yet. Yeah, interesting concept, but the whole picture is not quite there. Immunities: cold, necrotic, and poison, and the old cold, necrotic, and poison. So yeah, I really don't understand why they removed thunder and lightning resistance. That just seems to have been a personal choice. Condition immunities for the bloodline sorcerer, or the bloodline banshee, is charmed, exhaustion, frightened, grappled, paralyzed, petrified, poisoned, prone, and restrained. Whereas the standard banshee is charmed, exhausted, frightened, grappled, paralyzed, petrified, poisoned, prone, and restrained. So the exact same. The senses for the bloodline: dark vision of 60 feet, passive perception of 10, and it knows any language that the sorcerer knows. Standard banshees have a dark vision of 60, passive perception of 10, and no common and elvish. So yeah, really just the damage resistances and the saving throws. The saving throws were boosted and 2 damage resistances were removed, but nothing else was changed. Passive perception, 10 on the bloodline. Passive perception, 10 on the standard. Yeah. Oh, right. Because of their stats. Yes. It should be +1 because of their wisdom, right? Yeah. So yes, this should be a passive perception +11. Okay. Okay, so that's choices. Okay, so moving on. So we have their abilities of detect life and incorporeal movement, which... Okay, so detect life within 5 miles, general direction. 5 miles, general direction. Now, again, incorporeal movement on the bloodline banshee has also been changed. Banshees can move through other creatures and objects if they were difficult terrain. The bloodline banshee takes 16 or 3d10 force damage if they end their turn in an object. However, the standard banshee takes 5 or 1d10 force damage. So this banshee is not resistant to lightning and thunder and takes more damage, like 2d10 more damage if they end their turn inside of an object. There is no CR. Yes, I do like boss minion concepts, but there is definitely no CR attached to this right now. Yeah, you're probably never going to do that. And there's no situation that I would say that you would even accidentally or emergency need your summon to do that. That's more when you have incorporeal movement. So the ability, and again, I would have expected more abilities. Like, again, right now, the only thing that this is really offering to the table is it's basically unkillable. So for 1 minute, you have this unkillable thing that resembles a banshee. So let's get into the really nitty gritty. This would destroy my minion from Shadow Monarchy. Oh yeah, this would destroy almost anything, just purely by outpacing it. So let's see. The Bloodline Banshee has Corrupting Touch. It's a melee spell attack, +7 to hit with a reach of 5, 1 target, 37 points, or a 10d6 +2 necrotic damage. Standard Banshee has a +4 to hit, 5 reach, and does a 3d6 +2 necrotic damage. So this is going from 3d6 +2 to a 10d6 +2. So 7 extra dive damage and an extra +2 to hit. And we don't know why. Just, it's a more powerful Banshee. So it's like they're just trying to take Banshee and move it up. The spellcasting ability, we haven't gotten one yet. Horrifying Visage. Each non-undead creature within 60 feet of the Banshee that can see them must succeed a saving throw or be frightened for 1 minute. A frightened creature, frightened target can repeat the saving throw at the end of their turn. Blah, blah, blah. If the target saving throw is successful. So basically, so this is saying that that will just automatically happen. And that's the same thing for Banshees. So with Banshees, it just happens. You have a chance to be scared. The difference here is the DC save went from a DC 13 to a DC 17. So that's a 4-point difficulty increase in saving out of this Banshee's Frightened. Oh yeah, so it does have a spell attack, so it does need one. Does it have a +2? It has, I think, just a +1 in each. Yeah, +1 in each. So far, no. Hecate, none of, so the class got aspects of Banshee. So you were able to get Horrifying Visage from the class, and you could basically use that as an action once per day. And then you also got, no, that's it. That's all you got was their Horrifying Visage. And then you were able to hover, and we kind of decided that just means that you can, not touch the ground if you wanted to at will. They also got that ability. So no consistency in spells. Yeah. So the DC is way higher for that. And then we have Whale, which is the Banshee releases a mournful wail, provided that she isn't in sunlight. The wail has the effect on the constructs and undead. All other creatures within 30 feet make a DC 17 saving throw versus the original DC 13. On a fail, they drop to 1 hit point. On a success, they take 55 psychic damage. So the difference is they don't automatically die on this one. So in every respect, this Banshee is more powerful, but not. It's not an insta kill, but it is a level. It's a field leveler. It basically, you pull this out, and in 1 minute, within 1 minute, it's going to move to the point of the battlefield where it has the biggest effect to make sure that you guys are one attack away from game over. It's literally just a damage nuke, no way around it. Like you basically, you do this to scare them, to give you advantage, so then it goes near them to nuke them, and then maybe it gets Corrupting Touch off. Like, this is basically, I see why he wanted to do a 1d4 plus 1 days now. He intended this to be this is it. This is the game over move. Yeah, I will say, Hecate, there was some flow, but this definitely doesn't. I will say, I don't really feel like this summon is deserving of the capstone. Like, I don't think it really works as is. It's too powerful, even as a capstone. And it just doesn't really quite work for the approach that I would go for a sorcerer, to be honest. Took away the true threat of a Banshee, because it felt like it takes away, just the idea that it took away the insta kill aspect, but also just made it scary in a different way. It made this almost just to that level of, oh, well, we're screwed. Like, instead of it actually being like we have a chance to just fully be annihilated, it's like this comes out and you're just screwed. And Hecate, just kind of give you a quick little rundown. So description wise, the Banshee haunted your family, so eventually you were able to siphon power off of it and become this Banshee Cursed sorcerer. You get a couple extra spells onto your list, and then starting at first level. So this one automatically bypasses the 3rd level subclass aspect of sorcerers, went right into first level. So you got Horrifying Visage. So once per day as an action, you could basically inflict the frightened condition on somebody, but if they succeeded their saving throw, they'd be more interested in you, asking questions about you, following you, things of that sort. You also got the Ghastly Movement. So all it says is you're now able to hover. So we debated a little bit on what exactly are the benefits of a non-flying creature having hover. And this basically just means that we decided that this would indicate you wouldn't set off things like pressure plates. So essentially you're just an inch or two off the ground. At 6th level, you got the Banshee Howl. And essentially, as a bonus action, you can spend any number of sorcery points that you have to make a single target ranged spell attack within 60 feet. And that target will take a d8 of damage for every sorcery point that you put into it. Spectral movement. So this one goes one step beyond the ghastly movement. So now you can actually get a flight speed of 40. I suggest that this should have come at 10th level and then give them incorporeal movement at 14th level. Then at 14th, you also got the Banshee's Cry, which all spells basically that don't have a material component that has a gold value are now just cast verbally with no somatical or material components necessary. And then finally, where you came in, the Haunted Bloodline gives you the ability to summon this incredibly unkillable Banshee. Scale leveling minion like yours would be great change. Oh yeah, absolutely. Luckily this one was an easy rundown. There have been some where I wouldn't have been able to run that quickly through what you missed. This one luckily had a lot of good, had a lot of like straightforward things. So, you know, overall, none of the abilities were bad in and of themselves, like to a great extent. It's just that the progression didn't feel satisfying. I didn't feel like, from a player point of view, I don't feel like the progression really gives me any insights on the lore. I spent a good long time talking about how this in general didn't really feel like a sorcerer. It definitely felt more like a warlock, like the Banshee, you know, eventually like, you know, becomes your patron. That would have made a lot more sense. I also discussed like being able to like take more of the Banshee's powers, like get more of what it could do. But yeah, very interesting idea. I like the creativity of approaching the sorcerer subclass differently. I like the idea of trying to do this mix of kind of a patron, but not a patron. I mean, this walked a very fine line between being a warlock and a sorcerer. I really think it could be cleaned up a lot better as a warlock personally, but overall, I don't think it's a completely dead idea. I don't think it's a unusable class. I really think it needs some polishing up. I really think that the Bloodline Banshee, I don't mind that we're trying to boost it and not make it a standard Banshee. This is just too much. An armor class of 27, way too much. Hit points of 120, not with that armor class. Just absolutely no way. The stats, I don't mind that they were boosted. That's fine. I don't understand why the 2 damage resistances were removed, maybe just for balancing purposes. Would have been nice to get like another ability, just because again, it's a more like powerful version. And I see why the whale was altered, but I would have rather have seen just give me a different thing that this Banshee can do. I mean, keep the same 3 actions, but just give me a much bigger like capstone option. That reminds me of like Ryuk's younger malnourished brother. It's a cool image though. But yeah, I feel like we could have just gotten like an extra ability and an extra action, and this thing would have felt way more terrifying with being just a little bit lower in the armor class, and you know, being a little bit closer to a standard Banshee, just with some extra abilities. I think that would have been a better way to go, would have been cleaner. And I think it would have helped the lore a little bit more, but that's how we all go about it. It's all different. Yes, so Pokéniner, all somatic spells do become verbal because it does specifically state all spells without a material cost now only have verbal components. So as far as I read that, if a spell had a verbal and somatical only, that counts as a spell without a cost, and therefore all spells are now verbal only unless there's a GP cost to it. Yeah, well, and exactly. And then you have you got to remember, like, sorcerers have meta magic, but so they already had subtle spell. So this just adds a complete, you know, that this basically overrides the need for subtle spell. Essentially, like, you're going to get subtle spell built in. So that's not a meta magic that you basically need. That's another great point. Why didn't we get another meta magic? I would have loved at the very beginning here when we got this expanded spell list. I would love to have seen a Banshee meta magic. I don't know what that would have looked like, but that would have been really cool to, like, maybe just add necrotic damage to any spell that you cast, right? Like, just something that allows you to harness more of that in terms of the meta magic. Because yeah, the meta magic is cool for sorcerers, but it never gets expanded upon. So yeah, I think that could be a useful area to develop as well. Yeah, different wail or scream would be really cool. I mean, it would be really nice if you could do like a banshee, like the Floodline Banshee have a scream where anybody within like 60 feet becomes frightened of it, like or all the enemies are frozen until the start of their next turn, like in fear, like it does a Banshee wail, and any creature within like 30 feet is like frozen in place until the end of their next turn. That would like just something like that to turn the tide, but not nuke the battlefield, right? You want to turn the tide of battle, not completely outweigh everything that you can do, right? Because like again, when you apply this to the more, you know, cornerstone battles you're going to have, this feels like it's going to be more of a walk in the park than it is a challenge. Homebrewing metamagics is very difficult to balance. And I think that's just because when you want to alter the way that spells are, I think you end up getting into that bias that you end up wanting to turn them into the spell that you wish they were, instead of looking at what would that spell look like enhanced or altered. And yeah, you can get that pretty damn early. So that would but waiting for it until late game wouldn't be nearly as fun. Yeah. I don't know. So this one's interesting. I like the idea behind it. See, this one is one of those ones where I much more applaud the creativity behind what we were trying to do here, especially when it comes to the new approach to a sorcerer having this kind of this bonded trauma, this trauma bonding kind of aspect to it is really unique. I really do like the aspect that it took over the body, that it was, you know, taking on the form of the Banshee little by little. It's just, yeah, each individual one sounded fine. I feel like the flow is what's off, right? Like the flight came a little bit too late. I think that would have been, split up a little bit. I mean, you can't do much because Wizards of the Coast decides that you have an 8-level break here, but that's just absolutely crap. And then, yeah, I think the big thing too is making, what was the Banshee Howl, making that an AoE for yourself, I think is a much better choice than making it a single target. And even like, I forget who mentioned it in chat, but the idea of it dropping off depending on how much further away you are. So 20 feet's full, and then it drops off at, 30, 40, and 50. Stuff like that just sounds really like it sounds like it could actually work a lot better with this than focusing on just that one target, because like I don't really feel that the rest of this build is designed for you to be manhandling a single target. You know what I mean? Like Cry of Casting is giving you access to all your spells in a much bigger way. This is giving you movement and getting you off the battlefield, but Banshee Howl's only focusing on one person. Horrific Visage is only concentrating on one person, and then the Banshee is just another creature, right? There's not what Kage would say is there's not a ton of synergistic or a synergy going on here, but there's not a lot of synergy going on in between each and every one of the spells, and that doesn't necessarily the spell progression doesn't seem to tell much of a story. Other than, I will say, like the spectral movement, that's kind of the only one really telling a story, is between the ghastly movement and the spectral movement. That's the one that seems to be pushing the line of, oh, now I feel like I'm actually getting better at something than I'm just getting new stuff as I go. So, yeah, I definitely don't need something like this. And I feel like I definitely feel like there's a lot of adjustments that I've made here. But I do want to reward the creativity, because it does. This has made me rethink. I will give it the extra point that this has made me rethink what a source of sorcery power is. So I will give it that. It makes me want to reconsider what could be the source of power for a sorcerer. Something like a family, focused possession or haunting is a really unique idea, and I want to play with that a little bit more. But unfortunately, when it comes to compatibility with High Point, this would need a lot of work for me in terms of the lore, the balancing, and the direction that I would go with a lot of things. This one really just isn't quite fitting for High Point, but I do want to give it the extra. I do want to give it an extra point for creativity because it does make me want to rethink some things. So, with that being said, I will be giving this one a 3 out of 10 high points for compatibility, mainly just because, again, the way I look at Banshees, the way I would implement these rules, and the way that I would want this to be available for more than just one player in the lore, I would be changing all of this up. And I want this to feel better for the player on the battlefield. I think, the Banshee Howl being AoE, being more useful in the battlefield, I think is better. And then just, giving more of that versatility from the Banshee, giving flight earlier, giving incorporeal form, I think would be great. I mean, even giving the sorcerer, what was it? Even giving the sorcerer at some point, corrupt touch, where, that their unarmed strikes cause melee or cause necrotic damage. Something, just little tiny things like that would just make it feel more in line with what the lore was trying to tell us. So yeah, hopefully Des isn't too upset with that. I don't know how old that one was. That's just closed. That's not Kage. I don't know how old or where they were working on that, but again, that was all a compatibility. That's just what we do, is do go over it, do put our 2 cents in. But of course, that is mainly just that score isn't so much what the value of it is. It is just whether or not I'd be able to use it in my realm. So that is our review for today. Thank you everybody for showing up and chatting with me, keeping me company while Kage was out. I do appreciate all of you for your input. Hopefully all of you will be back later this week. We do have our upcoming episode, our regularly scheduled episode on Friday. I think we might be doing another tangent episode. It's been really nice to doing those, and I haven't really nailed down a history of, but because I'm going to be studying and researching all week for our Saturday stream, I'm probably going to make it easy on myself, and for Friday just do a tangent talk. So Kage will be back with me. We're probably going to talk about role playing because we didn't get to talk about that last week. We got into side tangents of other topics. So we'll probably talk about role play, the various styles of role play, how to role play without role playing. And that's going to be the main topic for this Friday. And then for those of you that are interested, we are going to have an extra stream this Saturday in the Misfit Gamers Tavern, where we're going to be talking about the influence and history of divine power and deities in D&D and all of the editions. And that is going to come with 2 custom cocktails that I've created that we'll be making on stream and talking about and doing all of that. And they're going to be, tied to the topic at hand. So they'll be themed and everything else like that. So hopefully you guys can join us on Saturday. Right now, the goal is 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time that will start. First cocktail made about 1 o'clock, and then the next cocktail about 3. And then depending upon where we are in the topic, we'll probably end around between 3:30 and 6. And if we're just going with it and everything's going great and you guys are having fun, then we'll continue and just, keep on going. But yeah, the idea is to get a good solid 4 to 6 hours, all day. And, just have some fun, talk about, what's going on in the tavern, and get to talk a little bit more about, the influence of deities in D&D. So that's going to be us for today, or that's going to be me for today. I hope you guys had a fantastic weekend. I hope you have a great week ahead of you. We will be back on Friday at our normally scheduled time. And yeah, an extra stream is happening this Thursday or this Saturday. So I hope you guys are going to be there. I hope to see everybody because it's going to be a lot of fun. But I hope you guys like this episode as well. Let me know in the comments on YouTube what you guys thought about this class, what you guys would have done different. Definitely want to know what you guys thought about that Banshee, the Bloodline Banshee. Let me know in the comments what you guys thought. And if you want to be part of the community, if you want to chat with us offline, or if you want to submit your own homebrew for Mondays to do that, you can do that in our Discord. So I'm going to pop that link in chat right now if you want to join the community Discord. And if you miss anything on today's VOD and you want to go back and watch that, or if you want to catch any of our other live streams, you can do that on YouTube. So that link can be found on our link tree. Link is in the chat for that. So you guys can go find us on all of our social medias as well. That's going to be me for tonight. I don't have anything else to chat about. And I kind of have a long week ahead of me with a bunch of research and some new work projects. So with that, I think I'm going to just cut it here, get some good sleep tonight, and focus for this weekend. So thank you again, everybody. I mean, who did we have here today? We had Lucifer, we had Cosmic, we had Soul Collective, we had Hoilepa, we had Aki, we had I think I already said Lucifer. Cosmic was here, Pokeniner was here, Hecate was here. I think we had pretty much the main crew except for Dez and Big Dungeon. I think that was pretty much all the main players. Otherwise, we're here. So thank you guys, all of you, each and every one of you. It is so so great for you guys to be here. It feels so good to have you guys return and enjoy the content. And I'm happy to provide it to you guys. So enjoy the rest of you guys' week. I will see you guys on Friday, and I hope to see all of you on Saturday. Cheers.